know that Dato Paduka Ir Keizrul is the past president of the Institution of Engineers Malaysia and is currently the chairperson of the Disciplinary Committee of the Board of Engineers Malaysia, or BEM. And I believe he is the best person to talk to us, to explain to us what this REA 1967 is all about. From the oil and gas industry, we are trying very hard to encourage engineers who are working in this industry to get themselves registered, first as a graduate engineer and subsequently obtain their PE and PEPC. It is an uphill task because outside of the building industry, the oil and gas industry is more or less self-regulated, but nevertheless, it is very important that everybody follows what is the requirement stated in the Registration of Engineers Act 1967. So why do we need to get ourselves familiar with REA 1967? I think we need to know, why did Parliament enact the REA? Is there any connection between REA and other acts of Parliament? What is the difference between the REA and RER? Those are written in the synopsis that we have given out. But also equally important is in some industries that where the contractors do EPCC projects, how does REA apply to them? So today, in the next 1 hour, I'm sure Dato Keizrul will explain to us in detail what this act is all about. And like Kasma said, if there are any questions after that, please forward it to us. I was informed we have almost 500 people viewing this online, in addition to about 30 who are in this auditorium. I must say the IM auditorium is a very opulent place, and we should use these facilities more often. And if we can, we will use for future MOGECs event, we will use this facility. And I was also told that the audience in this auditorium and online comes from various industries, including the few names who registered who are currently overseas. So we are going to listen the Registration of Engineers Act 1967. With that, I invite Dato Paduka Ir Dr. Haji Keizrul Bin Abdullah to the stage. Please, sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum, and a very warm welcome to this talk. First, I'd like to thank Engineer Rashid, President of MOGEC, for inviting me to explain to you all about the Registration of Engineers Act 1967. Little bit of caution, I'm talking about an Act of Parliament. So it's going to be a very boring subject, and I hope you would try and stay awake, because there are some things in the Act that might be useful for you to know. Right, so I'll talk about the Registration of Engineers Act 1967. And I'll do it in a way, I'll pose some questions and I'll try to use the Act to explain, to give the answer to the questions. So the first question would be for me, what is the Registration of Engineers Act 1967? REA for short, right? And the answer is the Registration of Engineers Act 1967 is an Act of Parliament, right? And it's an Act of Parliament first enacted by Parliament in 1967. Hence, you will always see 1967 when we refer to the Act itself. So this is interesting because 1967, today we are in 2022. And so what does that mean? That means the act is now 55 years old. But interestingly, the Board of Engineers says they are celebrating the 50th anniversary. Right? So there appears to be a difference, right, between the date that the act came into, was born in Parliament, and the date that the Board of Engineers was born. And let's see what happened. So in 1967, Parliament passed an act called the Registration of Engineers Act 1967, and it's called Act number 66. So at that point in time, since independence, this is the 66th Act passed by Parliament. But the Act didn't come into operation until 5 years later, in 1972, through Gazette, it was operationalized. And it became operational on 7th of July, 1972. And then they found there was a problem. The Act was operationalized, but they couldn't form the Board of Engineers. So they had to make another amendment very shortly after, which was passed by Parliament on 23rd of July, 1972. Hence, the Board of Engineers was formed only in 23rd of August, 1972. And so on 23rd of August next month, the Board of Engineers would be 50 years old. And the board is organizing some events to celebrate that. In 1974, there were some revisions to the Act, and you will find every 8 or 10 years, amendments were made. So in 1987, there were some amendments made. In 2002, new amendments were made. In 2007, again, more amendments came in. And finally, in 2015, the last amendments that is in force as on today came into being. And it became law on 31st of July, 2015. So question then is, why did Parliament enact this act in 1967? And essentially, before that, we don't have an act of Parliament. Just like UK at that time and UK now, there was no law to govern engineering. Right? But sometime in the early 60s, a building collapsed. In the course of construction, a building in Chowkit Road collapsed, and some people died. So people then realized, we don't regulate, so anybody can claim to be an engineer, and anybody can now come and construct a building. So Parliament decided that there's a need to regulate the profession. So what is the purpose of this act? Right? The act first is to protect the public by what we call legislative control. That means you need a law to control who can do engineering, and it's because the work that engineers do has an impact on the public. Like engineers construct this building, if the engineer is not qualified, this building can collapse and all of us will be in deep trouble. Secondly, the act will create a body which will regulate the engineers and the profession. And thirdly, the act allows this body to set regulations. So the act itself is a very broad and general act. It gives certain powers, and to enforce the act, you do need a set of rules or regulations. Right? So three purposes for the act. First one is using legislative control to protect the public. Right? Always remember, the act is never to protect the engineers, it is to protect the public. Secondly, it allows for us to create a regulated body. And thirdly, it allows that body to make regulations. 2003, right? Now we come to what I call the Q&A session. And the Q&A session will be done in two ways. First, if you have any questions on what I have explained, you can ask, I will try to answer them. And after that, if you have no more questions, then I go into what is called okay, an interactive session where I ask the question and I look to you for answers. Okay, first, have we any questions from
Yes,
from Zoom?
from Zoom, we have from Mr. Wong. Can know for the PE chop for first year, what is the function?
The
Can I know for the PE chop first year, what is the function?
well, the PE is also entitled to submit for any product which is invented by him or by his employer. Right? So many people think the PE has no right to submit.
Okay. Second, does BM stipulates that only PE or PEPC are allowed to be shareholders in an engineering consulting firm?
No, anybody can be the shareholder.
For PE/PEPC engineers who are providing freelance engineering consultancy services, must he or she set up a ECP?
Okay, this is a question which I will ask you all after this.
All right. Okay. Sarawak Planning Authority requests the PEPCs to renew their registration with the department concerned by latest in the December the current year, which is not tally with the BM by the 31st January of following year. Can BM help to inform SPA to extend their deadline of renewal of their registration to tally with the deadline stated by BM to enable PEPC to collect enough CPD points?
Yes, I think the board should do that. Yeah, but essentially, each organization sets its own rules. Right? So for the board, the rule is you have 1 month to renew. Right? For the Sarawak authority, they are not giving you must do it before it expires. Yeah. Just like driving license, right? Essentially, when your driving license expires, JPJ don't give you 1 month to renew, except during COVID time. So you can say the board is quite kind to the engineers.
How public interest is governed by this?
Public interest is because the work of the engineer has implication on safety of the public. And that's the real purpose why we have an act.
Okay. For first year PE, is he limited to submit documents for the branch he is registered in only?
For
the branch he is registered in only.
yeah, you can only work in the branch of engineering. So whatever you want to submit must be in that branch of engineering.
We open the question to the floor.
Yes.
My question is the technologies, engineering technologies that come out from MBOT, do they have the same privileges or entitlement as the engineers? Thank you.
They get a title. They get a TS title. If they want to work as an engineering technologies, they have to register with the Board of Engineers. I don't know what the MBOT registers people for, but the Board of Engineers were very clear. If you do anything related to engineering, you have to register with the Board of Engineers. Sometimes we don't want to say too much because it relates to another act of parliament. But I've always said it's like they are selling the title TS. And actually, if you think about it, the TS title don't give you any entitlement. It's also not a passport the way the board's registration is. Maybe what I'll do is I'll go to the second part, and I'm going to do it in the form of no, it's not moving. Right, of case examples, and that will illustrate better some of the things that I have said. Right. So the first case example is very straightforward. Mr. AAA graduated from a recognized university, a recognized degree in Malaysia. Right. Question is it mandatory? Is it compulsory for him to register with BEM? Right. I just want to know yes or no. If you say yes, can you put up your hand? If you say no, can you put up your hand? Yeah, as an engineer, he has come out with a degree in engineering. Is it compulsory for him to register with the Board of Engineers? Right, so some say yes, right? Some say no. Okay, I don't want to say I don't know. No, he just graduated. Yeah. No, okay, let's see. They say when you give a talk, always start with a question that everybody is happy with. So, no, I can't control this. Something is wrong here. Right? It's yes if he wants to be an engineer. And it's, no, I think you mustn't do that because I can't move this. It's no if he doesn't want to work as an engineer, right? So like I said, always give a question, everybody says, see, I got it right. Now let's do one also simple, but a little bit more thinking. Right, so this Mr. A, he says, yeah, I want to be an engineer. So he registered with the board as a graduate engineer, right? Then he decided to print name cards. You know, he studied so hard, he's now an engineer. And he says, my girlfriend says, engineer must have IR. So he prints a card, engineer AAA, and then behind it, grad eng. Has he committed an offense? Again, yes? No? We look at the act, right? The answer is in the act. The act says what? Only a PE can use the abbreviation IR before his name. Right? He's a graduate engineer. But the key word here is actually use. Right? Now again, you look back at 7.1b, only a PE can use or display a name card to say he's a professional engineer. Right? So, has he committed an offense? You all say yes, if he used the name card. Right? If he doesn't use the name card, he just want to admire, he has not committed any offense. Right? That's no. If you show the girlfriend, he's already used it. Right? We have to understand the law as it is written. So I go a little bit more in case example 3, right? He printed this and then he realized, you know, I'm wasting my money, shocks in the end. So he decided, I change it. I don't use the IR, I use ENGR. You have all heard of ENGR, right? Has he committed an offense? Well, we have to look back at what the Act says. Right? The Act says only a PE can use and display a card which implies he's a professional engineer. So the question is, does this imply he is a professional engineer? Well, the answer is we haven't had a case like that yet, but he has to explain why it is not implying he is. So for him to be safe, my suggestion to him is he should use grad eng. Right? But of course, he doesn't want that, right? Okay, case example 4. Now he's become a director. He's already IR. So he worked very hard. So now he's a director in an ECP. And then, now it's difficult to get job. Its economy is in recession. So he decided that to cut costs, I will employ graduates from China and India because they don't have recognized degree. So they are very cheap. You don't have to pay them. And they don't complain as jurutera miskin. Right? So this engineer, and they graduates from universities in China and in India. And China also has constructed the Three Gorges Dam and so on. So we cannot say they don't know engineering, but we don't recognize their degree. Right? So they do all their work, and then our old friend, he signs it, he checks through, and then he says, I endorse it. Right? Has he committed an offense? I don't want to ask anymore yes or no, because you always say, oh, it's a trick question. Right? You think he has committed an offense? All right, let's go back, always go back to the law, right? A graduate who is registered with the board can be employed to provide professional engineering services. Okay? Now, they have unrecognized degrees. Therefore, they cannot be registered with the board. And therefore, when they do the design, they have already committed an offense. So they have committed an offense. But what about our old friend? You said yes and yes, because Section 24A is very clear. He cannot employ a person other than a registered engineer. Right? So that's a pretty easy question to ask. Right? So has he committed an offense? Yes. Now, I've got 7, so just 2 more. We might run out a little bit, but this case example would illustrate what the act actually means. Because when you listen, oh, the act says this, sometimes we don't see the significance of how it's worded. Right? He's still a director. He knows there's a BM scale of fees. I showed you earlier. But he heard that there was a court case where the judge ruled the scale of fees by the Board of Engineers is not mandatory. Right? So he decided not to charge his fees in accordance with the scale of fees because, engineers always complain the scale of fees, no client will pay them that scale of fees. Right? Has he committed an offense? And just to help you, I will confirm, yes, there is a court case and the judge ruled in the judgment, the BEM scale of fees is not mandatory. So is he right not to follow? The court of law has already said it is not compulsory. And now here we've got to think a bit more. Okay, so what do we do? Let's look at what the scale of fees is. Right? I showed you this just now. So what does it say? It says the Board of Engineers, with the approval of the minister, fix the following scale of fees to be charged by the registered professional engineer. So the judge ruled it is not compulsory to the public. This is this is a regulation from the board, so it is compulsory to the engineer. If he doesn't charge according to the scale of fees, he has committed an offense against a regulation and he is subject to a hearing and penalty from the Board of Engineers. So example 6 ties in with oil and gas because actually this talk started with oil and gas. And now we've got a company, ABC, bidding for a job, a large oil and gas project, and it's going to be undertaken under EPCC. Right? Oil and gas people know what EPCC stands for, but some other people may not know. So the E in EPCC refers to engineering, but actually it refers to the design. Essentially, EPCC is where you do the design, you bid for the job, you construct it, and you finish it and you commission, and then you hand to the client. Sometimes it's called a turnkey project. So there is a component of design in it. So now this company is wondering, there's a design, engineering design. There's a law called the Registration of Engineers Act. Must my company be registered as an ECP? Right? What do you all think? No? No, yes, I don't know. Right. First, we must see, right? The Act defines professional engineering services. What does it say? It includes the design, the construction, the commissioning of engineering works. Right? Now I see people are beginning to get worried. That's the definition in the Act. Right? And the EPCC, what does it say? The engineering, which is the design, the construction, you have extra the procurement, but there's the construction, there's the commissioning. Right? And this is the definition in the Act. Are you comfortable with it? Okay. Engineering works means whether it's public or private, includes processes, includes projects, which require the application of engineering principles and data. Right? So now, if I'm in oil and gas, I begin to get even more worried. Right? So you think you need to be registered? It's yes, if you do all the engineering work in-house. But it's no if you outsource those engineering components. Right? So there's no straight answer. If you do all of it in-house, the company does the design itself, it must register itself as an ECP. But the company can, of course, outsource it to other people to do the design. Right? So again, it's a yes or no answer. Right? So the company decided, yeah, I think it's too messy to register as a ECP. So can the company engage a PE to carry out the design? What do you all think? Right? A PE can take up employment which requires him to carry out or perform professional engineering services. A PE may submit plans or drawings in relation to an equipment, plant, or product invented by him or his employer. Right? But the employer is not a client. Right? So, can the company engage a PE? No, because the PE cannot be a consultant. Right? If the PE is employed by the company has to be registered as an ECP. Can the company employ a, oh, this is wrong. This should be a PEPC to carry out the design. Sorry, I missed out the other word. Right? PE tak boleh kan? What about PEPC? Yes, if no. So again, it's yes if the company does it in-house, but if the company doesn't do it in-house, then a PEPC can practice and they are entitled to submit the plans provided they are residing and practicing in Malaysia. And I will go a little bit more in the last case example, the next case example about what this really means. So can the company engage an ECP to carry out the design? Of course, it can, right? Because an ECP is entitled to submit plans to any person or authority. So if you now want to engage an ECP, what should you look for before you engage that ECP? Right? So first, you're going to make sure the ECP is registered with the board, right? And is registered as an ECP. And secondly, you should ask them to show you their certificate of registration. Remember, the certificate of registration expires on 31st of December. Right? So every year you have to ask them, show me that you have renewed it. Because if they haven't renewed it, they are illegally operating. Also, make sure that the work you're asking them to do is in their branch of engineering. Right? Because sometimes we forget to check and you're getting an ECP to do on mechanical when they are not registered in mechanical engineering. Right. Now we come to the last one, and this takes a little bit of time to try to explain it. Right. So we have our old friend, he's registered as a PEPC. Right. He practiced under the name of AAA Consulting Engineer. He didn't register it as an ECP because he says the fee is too high. The board charges wants to take 1,000 from me every year. Why should I do that? So when the board asked him, why are you not registering your practice as an ECP? He says, I am practicing in my personal capacity, right? In my individual capacity. Is he correct? To help you, let's look back what a PEPC can do, right? A PEPC can practice, isn't it? So he's practicing in his personal capacity. Right? But Section 8, I showed you earlier, he must be residing and practicing in Malaysia. So he says, yes, I'm practicing in Malaysia. I'm practicing in my personal capacity. So we have to understand the word practice. What is practice? What I did was I look at the dictionary and I type in practice with an S, and the dictionary says, oh, practice with an S is the verb of practice with a C. Right? That's not very helpful, right? So I've got to go in again and I got to type in with a C, and then it tells me it is pursuing a profession. Right? So practice, and the dictionary gave an example. A law practice is how you conduct, you do lawsuits according to the principles of law and the rules laid down by the court. Right? So using this, paraphrasing it, I've got engineering practice is the manner how you conduct, how you carry on, how you provide professional engineering services. Right? So practice, when you say, I'm in engineering practice, it means I am doing all of this in providing professional engineering services. And under section 8.1, it includes submitting plans, surveys, designs, and so on. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. So in effect, when you say, I have a practice, actually we are saying, I'm running a business. So we go back to what are the laws in our country that regulates business. So we have an Act of Parliament, and this Act of Parliament talks about registration of businesses. And the Act says, a business, this is how it defines. That means when you say, I'm running a business, in law, Parliament has defined the word business as any form of trade, commerce, craftsmanship, calling, profession. Right? If you are trading, you are selling things, right? You are providing some services. If you are doing something through a profession for the purpose of gain, that you want money from it, it's called a business, right? Including for professionals. But it doesn't include if you are employed, you are not running a business. You are an employee. Okay? Or if you do it for charity, because you're not doing it for gain, then you're not running a business. Right? This is the definition of an Act of Parliament in Malaysia. Now let's look back, and what it means is, if you practice, you provide professional engineering services, but you do it for charity, you're not running a business. If you practice and you charge fees, you're running a business. Okay, so he claims, I'm practicing in my individual capacity. Right? And he says, I'm not running a business because I don't register with the registrar of businesses. Right? So is he correct? Because under section 5.1 registration, anybody who starts a business must apply to the registrar to register the business within 30 days. Right? The law is very clear. You are an engineer, doesn't matter, because profession is also covered under business. And so by law, if you start a business, you have to register your business with the registrar of businesses within 30 days. Right now, I see people getting worried because you didn't do that. Fortunately, subsection 4 says, this act doesn't apply to a business where you're already registered under the Companies Act. Right? It's silly, isn't it? You do business, but you're already registered under SSM. So the law says, if you're already registered under the Companies Act, you don't have to register with the Registrar of Businesses. It also goes on to say, if it is government who is doing the business, they are okay. You know, all laws don't apply to government. It's under the Interpretation Act. It's interesting. The government comes up with the laws, but the laws don't apply to government unless in the act itself it's stated this act shall also apply to government. Right? In our act, not only it doesn't have that, it goes on very explicitly to say the federal and the state government are exempted from the act. Right? So when the government do business, they don't have to register. If you're already registered with Society Act like IEM, you can do business because you're already registered under the Societies Act. Therefore, you don't need to register with the Registrar of Businesses. And number 4, it says, if your business involves a profession and there's already a law for that profession, which says only those who have certain qualification under that law and whose name are registered under that law, you don't need to register with the registrar of businesses. Right? So now you say, nasib baik. Right? Because this one is very familiar, isn't it? It sounds very much like the Registration of Engineers Act. So if there's a law which registers people in that profession, then you can do business for that profession and you don't need to register with the registrar of businesses. Right? So he says, I'm not running a business because I don't need to register with registrar of businesses. But yes, he is running a business. He's not running a business if he does it for charity. He don't collect fees. So to explain it, there are some terminologies which is used in the Act. You will find in the Act, they use the term person. Right? You will find this term in the Act. Person, you also will see sole proprietorship, you see partnership, and you see body corporate. Right? All in the Act, you will always come across this term, a person, a sole proprietorship, a partnership, and a body corporate. And what this means is, when the Act use the term person, they are referring to an individual. When they use the term sole proprietorship, they're actually referring to the sole proprietor or the only owner of what? Of a business. When they use the term partnership, it is the partners in a business. And body corporate is a company doing business. Right? And in our case, what is the business that we're doing? The business we're doing is providing professional engineering services. So we are doing business. Sometimes, in Malaysia, we always use the term businessman in a different context without realizing every one of us who are having our own company, our own business, we are also businessmen in that sense. So a person, for me, I can say, I can make a name card as a person. I can put in a name card, Engineer Dato K, and I'm a PEPC. I've not broken any law. Right? If I decided to now start my own business, then I can call my business Dato K Consulting Engineer. Right? Because by providing professional services, being a consultant, I am doing business. So I have to give a name to the business, and the name I give is Dato K. Now I get a lot of job because people like me, because maybe I charge low fees, but still according to the scale of fees. And then I decided I need to expand my business. So I bring in a partner. Right? I look for another engineer, and I've got a partner. Then I call the partnership now Dato K and City Consulting Engineers. Very familiar, yeah. This city is a familiar name in engineers. Yeah, many engineer city. Now, if I now suddenly I realize, if it's a sole proprietorship and it's a partnership, the liability of the business is on you. Like you start your business, you call it a sole proprietorship. What it means is, if the business owe money, you are the one who is liable for paying the debts. Same thing with a partnership. So I felt, okay, it will be smarter for me to change it into a company. Right? So I should change it into a company. Juru Perunding Dato K dan Siti Sendirian Berhad. Because under the Companies Act, your liability in a company is only to the extent of your shareholdings. And that's why most people do business through a company. Only engineers, somehow, we've got, under ECP, we have got 1,000 over registered sole proprietorship. Yeah. And they don't realize when you register as a sole proprietor, you are liable for all the debts of the sole proprietorship. So, then what we can see is, as a person, if I want to practice and I want to collect fees, I have to change it into a business. I cannot practice in my personal capacity. I'm running a business, and I have therefore to decide, do I do it as a sole proprietor, or do I do it as a partnership, or do I do it through a body corporate? Right? So if you are consultant, you are running a business, please make sure you understand that, right? So you are running a business. Now, in our act, it says a sole proprietorship, that means you run a business and you own it yourself, or a partnership, you are running a business and you are in partnership with your partner, or your company is running the business. And if that business is in engineering, then you must register your business with the board as an ECP, because only an ECP can practice. Right? If the business is in engineering, only a registered ECP can do that business. And you can recover your fees in court, right? So when he says, I'm practicing in my individual capacity, yes, he would have committed an offense, unless he says, I'm doing for charity, I don't collect any money, right? So if you don't collect money, you're okay. But if you want to collect your fees, you have to register your business with the board as an ECP, right? And I think I overshot the time, but I thought this way would explain better some of the issues. I'm still open for any questions. Outside, I can still answer.
Is there any question from the floor? All right, never mind. It's okay. Dato, thank you. Please stay on the stage for a while. I would like call upon Engineer Rashid to present you the token of position from MOGEC. Oh, then. All right, thank you. Yeah. Engineer Rashid, anything from you to before?
Assalamualaikum. I think that was very elaborate and very detailed. I didn't realize that from a REA 1967, Dato Keizrul explained to us in almost 2 hours something that supposedly to being a very dry subject, but he managed to make it very interesting. And I think a lot of people are worried now because probably a lot have not really followed what is in the act, but it's good to know, and so that we can correct and if we have done something wrong. As I said earlier, MOGEC is very grateful to IAM and Dato Keizrul especially, and hopefully we will be able to collaborate again. And as I said earlier, there are other branches of the Registration of Engineers Act or with the Board of Engineers, the things that you do in BEM, we may want to invite you again to discuss things that are related to Board of Engineers. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Chair Rashid. As the saying goes, to every beginning there's an ending, and now our event has come to its end. Once again, thank you, Dato Keizrul, and our attendees. We really appreciate. I look forward to seeing all of you for our next event. Wassalam and thank you very much. And Selamat Hari Raya Adha.